So we are here now. Let's begin with our first panel discussion. In the new normal, work life, and business models have evolved drastically from what they were just 2 years back. We, as people, have changed. We have also changed as working professionals poised to deliver our newer roles in newer challenges. This is where technology plays a vital role: tech, work tech, and to be very precise, HR tech. So, what is the HR tech strategy that you need? What do you want it to do for you? And how will it help you to bring people outcomes closer to business outcomes? Let's hear it from the people who are not only driving the economy, but also the talent economy. I'm very delighted to moderate our first panel discussion on HR Tech 4.0, Reimagining HR for a Hybrid Workforce, with a stellar group of leaders. Please put our hands together for our dear board member, Wong, a mentor and a guide for all of us at PeopleStrong. Very happy to have you, Suyen, on board. Along with Suyen, we have Ms. Hefen Wong, Director, Development and Organization Transformation, GovTech at Singapore, Lynn Koch, CEO of Mula-X, and Dr. Surapit Promsit, Chairman and Institute Director, Continuing Education and HR, Thammasat University. Suyen, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next panel, which is Reimagining HR for a Hybrid Workforce. My name is Suyen Wong, and I'm delighted to be joined by Hefen Wong, who is the Director, Development and Organization Transformation for GovTech, Lynn Koch, Founder and CEO, Mula-X, and Dr. Surapit Promsit, Chairman and Institute Director, Continuing Education and HR at Thammasat University. Thank you for joining us. You know, Arthur C. Clarke was a science fiction writer, best known for 2001 Space Odyssey, which some of you may be familiar with. Back in 1964, he wrote, "Perhaps only 50 years from now, a man may conduct his business from Tahiti or Bali just as well as he could from London. Men will no longer commute. They will communicate. They will travel only for pleasure." And as I reflected on that, I sort of said, well, doesn't that describe our exact situation these days? The fact that we can actually be communicating with each other over technology, the fact that our workplaces are changing and bringing in sort of hybrid workplaces is exactly the purpose of this conversation. So as we step into a new era of workplace and technologies that are going to radically transform business ecosystems, it's really an opportunity for HR leaders to take the lead with agility and to sustain value for the future of HR. So we're going to be talking about three overall topics. The first is the changing enterprise. What does that look like? Second, the future of work and the new future of HR. And third, leadership in the next normal of work. So maybe let me just open up. Hefen, if I may just start with you. Businesses were pushed to make the transition from a physical work model to remote and then to hybrid. At your organization, what contributed to the ability to redirect operations effectively, and how are you applying the learnings of this in an emerging workforce model?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's good to be with all of you on the panel today. So I'm from GovTech, and what happened when the pandemic hit was GovTech had to change our operations very quickly because we support the IT of the entire public service in Singapore. So I think we had to raise our VPN and telecommuting abilities from 18% to 100% of the entire public service in just a couple of weeks. And I think it really tested us to quickly support the agencies to ensure that they can still deliver their public services in a virtual setting. And we also saw it as a big window of opportunity for digital transformation. Yeah, so that was how we saw things when the pandemic started, moving from physical to remote work. And then from remote work to hybrid work, what we really saw was that recently I read a Microsoft Work Index study, and it was quite interesting. There's data on Microsoft Outlook and Microsoft Teams showing that I think our emails from 2020 to 2021 increased by 40 billion. And our meetings on Microsoft Teams have more than doubled. So it shows that we have really pivoted, but it also shows that we are working at a great digital intensity that's quite unsustainable as well. So what we are currently seeing with hybrid work is that we do get anecdotally instances of people experiencing burnout. So there's a lot of emphasis on mental wellness, which I'm sure happens in many organizations now. We have a very flexible hybrid work arrangement where people are encouraged to meet their teams in person at least once a week. Teams are free to design their own work practices, and we saw that people really missed spontaneous interactions, which also showed up in the Microsoft work study, that interactions within your immediate team have increased, but interactions with people outside of your immediate team have fallen a lot. Which just shows that we are getting kind of focused within our immediate teams with virtual work. Yeah, so what we are doing in the hybrid workplace is we set up hot desking to encourage spontaneous interactions. And we have a 24/7 anonymous counseling hotline that's complimentary for our employees. And we do a lot of brown bags on mental wellness, collaboration, and we also launched a design thinking challenge to get people to be aware of our needs in a hybrid workplace and co-design solutions together. Yeah, so that's kind of the change that we have seen from as the workforce and workplace is evolving. Yeah.
And how has the response been from colleagues and teams?
When we do staff engagement, we get a big range. Some people really miss their colleague, especially those who joined in the pandemic. They would prefer to meet in person frequently. And we have lots of engineers, and some people are really introverted. So we do get feedback saying that they love being at home all the time. It's like super productive for them. And so it's really a great variety. But what we do in GovTech is we do watch the practices in tech companies very closely, because the tech sector is really hot now. So people are moving across companies quite quickly. So remote work is also a very feasible option for employees. So we are very flexible with our hybrid work arrangement. Yeah.
That's great. I think it's becoming, in various studies, actually a important requirement for certain segments of employees who are actually looking at that as a very important criteria in choosing an employer, isn't it?
That's right.
So Lynn, maybe I can bring you in here. With COVID-19 dramatically accelerating the evolution of workplaces, and Hefen has talked a little bit about that, how are you rethinking your workforce management strategies for 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Sian, for asking the question, and Hefer has brought up some really interesting points. I think in terms of COVID, it basically has forced us to think about what is a priority with respect to our workforce. And generally, health and safety has always been top of the priority list for us, and I think also for many, many companies. So you see some companies that I'm an advisor to a few companies that were factories, for example, and they needed to start to think about split workforces to try and segregate their workforces so that not everything was shut down if something happened to the individuals. They started to think about how to get all of their employees vaccinated as quickly as possible, because once again, health and safety was top of the priority list. And all of these A and B teams, particularly if you were in offices, in order to make sure that we could keep the workforce going. But what I've also seen in my startup, I have a fintech startup, Mula-X, is that with COVID-19, some of the young people felt kind of, it was very difficult for them, I have to say. So I also saw kind of a difference between people that were more established and had places that they could comfortably work at home. Like I loved working from home, for example. I was very comfortable. I didn't need to go anywhere. I didn't need to spend any time on the road. But some young people didn't like it as much because they didn't have the interaction. They felt like they didn't know what was going on and what was just, and they felt a bit sort of more disengaged. And so the strategies that I had to put in place was to make sure that people felt bonded, people felt engaged, people felt that they understood what was going on in the company, which is kind of sometimes difficult, particularly if you're trying to run a startup or if you're trying to run a big organization. You know, I think they all have the similar issues, which is communication. How do you communicate? How do you engage, your staff in terms of knowing what to do? And so I think some of the strategies of the workforce, I mean, obviously I said health and safety being top of the list. I think the second part is really about engagement and ownership, and also how do you start to manage workforces that are not right there, not punching in and out, not working 9 to 5, but working remotely, working flexibly, half in, half out, A and B teams. So all of these things are quite important for employees to think about. And I also now I feel like everyone now has had a taste of being more flexible. So we're also now seeing, certainly in my startup, people are now saying, yeah, no, flexible. We like that. We like the fact that we can decide when we work from home. We like the fact that we can decide when we work. So I think some of the things that we now have to start to think about is how do we then start to manage a business that have all of these different nuances of individual needs and wants. And once again, I think it is communication. It is about trust. It is about being very focused on what you believe the vision of the company is, the objectives of the company, and then individual objectives that from there.
Great points. And maybe that's an invitation to talk about, well, what does that mean in terms of driving change and perhaps even different ways of leading, right? Because, leaders may have grown up in an environment where they're actually used to leading in a more physical manner, and now you've got remote. And it's not just that it's remote and hybrid, it's that there is no one model, right? So that's actually quite challenging. All right, last but not least, let us bring in Dr. Surapit to perhaps address this from a different angle. A hybrid workforce would definitely require a hybrid way of management. So how should executives deal with this, and what should they adjust in their approach?
Right. Thank you so much for the question. And I think this is what we have been talking a lot in this session about adjusting, about changing the workforce. And at the end of the day, the person who also needs to adjust is also executives, right? So I guess there are two ways of looking at this. Some types of executives, they are already very quick in adjusting, like very agile as in nature of what they have to do. They have to change, have to adapt, so that they have a quick fix or they have the solution for the company. But sometimes some of the functions of the executives are more of routines, and even though there is COVID or even though there is a change in digital, probably their roles do not change much. I guess it's time to rethink about the adaptations of both kind of executives. So I thought the first group of executives are very quick and agile, and the next movement of coming back and having to say if what kind of workers, what kind of people have to come back to work, and even combine the physical work with working from home. And the second type of executives who normally do not adjust much. What will happen next? I guess this is a lot to do with generations. Believe it or not, we have research. To some people, we'll mention a lot about generation of X and baby boom of being very difficult to change or very hard to adjust. Believe it or not, during COVID, we have also found that they have an accelerating rate of these people adjusting to technology. And this is not by surprise, because baby boomers and Generation X, once there is a target or once there is a goal, And once there are things that they have to comply with, sometimes if they, see the very importance of what they have to do, and if there is a clear direction from the company, they comply, they adjust, and they determine to be able to adapt and change the roles very quickly. And this are in, for example, not just about going into Zoom meeting, but also using more technology in providing feedback to the employees, talking more online, making themselves available more on the online platform, for example, on this social media kind of a way, and being more flexible in terms of using digital in communicating with their employees, right? So I guess when it is a time for change, baby boom and Generation X executives, it looks like they are very adaptable. And if the company wants them to do so, they're really ready. And we have a very interesting facts about Generation Y and a little younger executives, and we find that they are very digital oriented already. But when in times of a lot of change, or sometimes in demand for different hours of work, or sometimes because it is happen to be digital and more virtual, more hybrid, they tend to say they lose personal time, and they want more of although they have be able to work in digital, they hope to have a lot more on the life and balance of the work. That's why you will have a new kind of vocabulary that are going around now, and they say work-life integration, right? And this is to their generation. They don't like it. They don't even like the word work-life balance, right? They think about why we have to integrate work into life, why there can't be a lifestyle where there is a clear separation, something like that. And this is one of the findings that we have at the moment. So I guess executives in adaptations to this kind of change may not be as difficult as employees, because to a number of people that we have been talking to, they found that they are in the top of the organizations and they understand that this is required. But what we find to be very interesting is people who we think are going to be easy in adaptations to change are a little more difficult.
So I think one of the things that I'm taking away from your key points is that employees or executives actually need to make sure that they are proactive in terms of being adaptable as well. So it's not just about leaders changing the way they work, but executives absolutely play a key role in that. And then the second point was really around to not be blinded by stereotypes that we might traditionally have had around different generations and how agile or how adaptable they might be. So thanks very much for that. Maybe, Hefen, we can hear from you. How are you actually building the capabilities to drive change at GovTech? And then how are you enabling and motivating yourself as people leaders to drive that continuous change?
So in GovTech, it's quite interesting. We started this GovTech Way leadership operating system, and we started it about 1+ year back, where we created the principles together as a management team. And we have 3 key principles: to act with purpose, model empathy, and develop people. So if you see, model empathy and develop people is really emphasizing more of the soft side of leadership, which ties back to the question that you're asking. I think in this complex, fast-changing environment, there's an increasing need and expectations of flexible leadership and leaders that can connect with you. So by creating this leadership model, we are communicating it across the organization. We are sending our we sent our management team for these experienced leadership, and it's such every guy you have through a workshop to know what they can expect from their leader. And over time, we're also going to get into recruitment and performance management. So that's one aspect of how we are going to support our leaders in shifting skills this time. The more immediate and easier thing that we did was to provide hybrid work supervisory training for GovTech leaders to join and to guide them as to how do you manage your team in this hybrid setting. Yeah. And beyond that, on capability building, actually in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of last year, we actually launched the GovTech Digital Academy. We see it as a way to accelerate digital transformation in the government. It's really a academy that's for practitioners in the public service. Yeah, so that's one big way that GovTech is leading in terms of how do we support the transformation of the public service to do more in terms of digital change. Yeah.
Wow, sounds like you have your plate pretty full.
Yeah.
I was sort of taking this point around what you're saying about the leadership operating system. One of the things that I think is actually quite important is to also think about how you even change your performance management system, right? Because as you start thinking about hybrid work, remote work, it's really important for leaders to understand this concept of measuring results as opposed to how proximate somebody is and how much I see them in the office, and as opposed to measuring activity, right? But actually looking at results. Have you had to do any of that yet?
I think GovTech leads the way in terms of driving change in government. And actually, GovTech is pretty young. It's about 5 years old. It came from IDA, and most of our employees come from tech companies. So I think GovTech is really showing how performance is focused on skills and results, and less so based on like time norms or references to age or
Right.
Yeah. So I would say GovTech has been driving a change in performance management in the public service for a couple of years. Yeah. So as the tech agency that's expected to lead the government, there hasn't been a big discussion on shifting from face-to-face interactions to virtual, but
Right.
more from the aspect of supporting our managers to do it better.
Yeah. And in a way, it's great because it sounds like that was a process that was already underway, right? So it's not something that, oh my goodness, we have all these different things changing, and on top of that, we have to help people think about, measuring performance differently. It was already part of this overall change in terms of thinking about, like you said, skills and results. So hopefully that was eased or maybe accelerated, right, through this process, because it's not really important to do it that way. Talking about sort of, again, the role of leaders, let me see if we can bring Lynn back into the discussion. What have you seen as some of the critical areas that leaders must really take a closer look at in order to cater to the needs of the hybrid workforce?
Yeah, but before I do that, let me share, to Hefer's point about tech companies. And I wanted to share my experience where, as a banker, I was a banker for a long, long time, being in a very big organization. We had very set performance management objectives, measured it every 6 months. You put it into your system, and then somebody grades you, and then at the end of the year, you do that. But then when you move into a tech situation, which is the fintech that I've got now, it's opened my eyes up to a whole new world about managing by, deliverables, and not sort of managing by, as you say, show up in the office. Things like daily stand-ups, for example, that tech companies do is so telling. It's like they go around the room and it's like, literally in 15 minutes, everybody takes like 2 seconds to say, what are you working on today? Kind of thing. Where are you blocked? What are the issues that you need to unblock it, and have you blocked somebody else that's working on stuff? Then they have a couple of weeks of sprints where they actually do have deliverables and everybody is sort of kept on their toes. Now you can then say, well, it's very good for a development team that's very task oriented. What about everybody else within an organization that's working on sales, on strategy, on, on governance, compliance, finance, all that sort of stuff? I really do think a leader can actually break it down to those components, so that you don't have to worry about somebody showing up in the office, and that you can actually really manage, by deliverables. So when you then talk about some of the critical areas, I think, leaders themselves must change the way they manage other people. It is, I think it takes a very special person to be able to sort of let go, but at the same time really keep in touch. And I think some of the tools actually do help. I mean, obviously you got process, you've got framework, but some of the tools, I think these days, where they're project management tools, we put everybody on Slack, and there are similar things like that, where, conversation happens in a very sort of transparent way. So I believe if you're kind of not together, and people kind of say, oh, a lot of things happen when you have face-to-face meetings, or a lot of things happen when you're having a meal together. That's absolutely important. But in the absence of that, you need to create, I think, an environment where people are able to share, are very transparent about, what they're delivering and when they're delivering, what are some of the hiccups they have, and what are some of the blockages that they have. So I do think the tools are really important in terms of making sure that your workforce is equipped in order to keep in touch, is equipped to feel like they're contributing, is equipped to be able to report some of these things. I think that's quite key. And I think for companies, and I'm not talking about tech companies, just talking about normal kind of, the traditional companies. The ones that I think have adjusted really well is the ones that probably have already adjusted to a digital way of doing things, right? Whether they were having video conferencing rather than meetings, or whether they already, had channels of communication that they were already putting in groups. Everybody had a laptop as opposed to working off a desktop. So I think some of those companies actually adjusted better than others. And obviously, these are some of the critical areas that leaders would have to look to addressing. I mean, hardware and also the software of leadership as well.
I really like what you were saying about, how you actually balance letting go but keeping in touch. It sounds like such a paradox, but, as you say, if you've got the right tools, that can really facilitate that process, right? Because you can sort of stand back, see the big picture, but also see where intervention is needed and keep things moving really, really quickly. Let's bring Dr. Surapit back in for this. And let me pose this question to you. With the talent boundaries blurring, what are some of the new age approaches and strategies that you're adopting to manage performance?
Wow, a very interesting question about performance, about talent. And I guess performance now is a key discussion around all of us, because we are not very sure anymore about how to say if it is the working hours, if it is the result, because there are many other factors coming in more than before. And a number of times, believe it or not, it is not about our belief in how to make the performance better in this kind of situation. But back to the basic of HR is about the system that has to go in place. And the system do not have to be the traditional one. The technology that help us track and trace and to understand the insight of what employees have learned, have developed, have adapted. These will be key essentials. So to me, the conversations around executives, around HR directors, especially in Thailand, we realize that the technology we use determine how we understand talent, determine how do we choose, select, develop, or even evaluate talents, or even to maintain them. Why we talk about technology? Because we want to know more about them. We want to have insights about them, not just who they are, not just the end result of their performance. Because as we now work a lot on projects, as we now do not have any solution to anything for so sure in so one problem of the organization. So what happened is CEO or directors always have to put things into project. We have to put people around in different projects. And sometimes when we assign someone to work in some projects, we don't even know at the beginning would this work, right? Sometimes we have to switch. Sometimes we have to have, plan A, plan B, plan. A number of times there are uncertainties. So the most important thing is how do we track and trace the development of these people, where we assign them to work in different projects? What are feedback? What are some reactions of their colleagues? And although we know their talents, you believe it or not, that talent sometimes can be a very situational kind of factor because they are in certain kind of projects that they are very talented, or sometimes they work with us, we find them to be very talented, but when they move or when we shift them to work in certain kind of projects, maybe not so talented, although this person may have a basic competency or maybe some good qualities, but in certain situations they're not. So track and trace, and the way we have the platform to be able to keep the performance, keep the insights from their colleagues, and most importantly, to keep whatever this person learned. And this will, at the end of the day, help us track and trace better, understand where these persons go and work better, and to be able to plan and develop these kind of talents better. And believe it or not, this will keep talents to you longer because you understand them. People sometimes love challenges, but they want also as well a design for them to have the right challenges, right? So if we don't have those kind of insights and we keep shifting them around and we tell them, oh, challenges are waiting ahead, and be okay to cope with every situations, a number of times that works, but a number of times that is also a punishment, right?
Wow. I mean, I really like what you're saying about leveraging technology to really understand the development of people, and also deriving the insights and the analytics to really figure out in what circumstances people do their best. Because as you said, it's situational. Somebody could be great in project A, but not so good in project B. And so the technology actually can provide those insights to actually help us nurture people in the spaces that they need nurturing in. So fantastic stuff. So we've covered off a pretty broad range of issues in this discussion. Maybe just to close off, let me invite Dr. Surapit to share any closing thoughts. Dr. Surapit?
Thank you so much. And in closing, I guess digital, a number of times, it is for us to make our process very systematic, or sometimes help us have things streamlined so that we see exactly what to be done, A, B, C, D. And a number of times, system or process or digital help us to have a structured way of managing people, understanding the needs of them, and to be able to manage and evaluate them effectively. I have to say that is true, and half of it probably needs to be changed as well. I guess what needs to be done here is to understand that the technology now to be used, especially for us HR people and for the CEO, is more of insights, and insights in terms of problems, case studies, what employees learn, what employees are able to do well, to not do well, and to be able to grasp the the depth of the situation and to be able to manage better, right? So as a boss, as someone who is managing a number of projects, all of us do. What we lack here is that we don't know if the employees in different teams, in different situations, in different problems, how are they doing? And we want to have that not in a 6 months time or not in a month's time. We want it, every day, and sometimes every half a day, so that we know that we don't lose track. And if there is any not proper way of doing so, ineffectiveness of some way, and we are able to adjust quickly. So technology cannot be something which you think about having it as a big system going to make a very clear structure of what you do. Maybe a technology could be more agile, could help you to be more agile. And agile may be not only just the way we think, not only just the way we work, but maybe HR has to come from data to make us really making the way we work agile.
Well, there's a lot in there, and I really like how you linked everything together, which is starting from using technology to generate insights, but not just insights, but getting it fast, real time, so that we can adjust dynamically the way we work with our talent. And this agility is actually going to obviously help drive the business forward, as we obviously are living in much more hybrid, remote, as well as disruptive times. So thanks very much for that. Hefen, would you like to jump in and talk a little bit about how you just sort of see us progressing from here?
I think it's exciting times. I
Yeah.
mean, I have colleagues who are really looking to do like really like a digital nomad lifestyle. I mean, I have a couple of friends who have done it already, who are doing it now, and more people are interested to be traveling and working by looking for remote work. So I think, and increasingly as our work, I feel it's more boundaryless now. Yeah, and I feel it's exciting times in the next couple of years to see how the workforce and the nature and the boundary of workplace continues to evolve. So I'm actually looking forward to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Exciting times ahead. Lynn, what's your take?
No, I'm also really excited about the future of work and how we organize ourselves. I think the ability to be able to work remotely, the ability to have flexible working hours means that one has to be well equipped. And I talked about that in terms of hardware, but I also want to emphasize that training is really, really important, and making sure that, our teams are trained well, that can adapt to the change, because change is coming very, very quickly, especially, when you're all not together, and there's a lot of agility and flexibility. So I would like to emphasize that that's an area that I think we should all be looking at, but tremendously exciting, and to be able to work from anywhere and anytime with anyone, really. It's very, very exciting.
I think in summary, a few themes that I think we've talked about. Number one, it's really about rethinking the way work is done, and that's just a wholesale mindset shift around expectations of work. And the other side of the coin is expectations of life, right? So Hefen, you talked earlier about mental wellness. I mean, that's absolutely a critical component to how we think about the way work gets done. I think there are then implications on culture, and both of you talked about culture and how you actually change that culture. You bring in those shifts, obviously, through having leaders adapt the way they work as well. One of the things that's fundamental to enabling that change is putting in place training to equip people with the right skills, but also tools that help facilitate the process and actually can help drive culture change as well. And finally, my takeaway from this conversation really has been that as we think about a hybrid workplace, it's really about being very differentiated about how we think about the workforce. It's, in the past, it would have been very much a one size fits all. This is the way things are done, and you've got this way of, performance management and this expectation of leaders. And not to say that there isn't a red thread that connects all of that, but the way we might need to operate is actually a bit more nuanced, depending on different segments of the workforce. For example, Hefen, you talked about certain groups of the employee population might actually crave the interaction, and others actually prefer a bit more space. And so as a leader, you're going to be really able to flex across these different boundaries. But in summary, lots to be excited about. Probably requires us to have a great toolkit, leadership-wise, as well as physical toolkit, hardware and software. I like what you said about that, Lynn. Looking forward, I'm sure all of us are, to the future of work. And perhaps that's where Arthur C. Clarke comes back in, which is we are living the future today. And I reflect back to cartoons by the Jetsons in the 1950s, where they're talking about video calls and telemedicine. Well, the future is here today. So thank you very much, Lynn, Hefen, and Dr. Surapit, for this really engaging conversation today.
Thank you, Suyen, and everyone on the panel for such a gripping session. Do share these learnings with your friends and colleagues using hashtag HRTech for APAC. Now that we've finished the first session, we'll take a short networking break and meet up at the virtual exhibition area where you can connect, network, and engage with solution providers. See you on the other side.